Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is doing all right. Happy Monday. I feel like there's an echo in this room. I may have to change rooms at some point, but I hope you guys are doing all right. It is Monday morning. It is December 15th, 2025, and we have had a hell of a news weekend over the course of this weekend. First, can you guys hear me okay? Is there any issue with the sound? Everybody hears me loud and clear, no issues, no echoes, no bizarre anomalies that I should be aware of. Let me know, let me know, let the brother know, let the brother know. Sounds good. I hear one sounds good from John Crowfeather. Anybody else? My mic sounds nice. Check one. My mic sounds nice. Check two. Are you ready? All right. Badass. Yeah, this has been a wild, bloody weekend. A wild and bloody weekend. And when I say that, obviously, there was a shooting at Brown University. There was that. Um, in fact, at Brown University, they misidentified the shooter, in which case they had to come out and effectively apologize to the guy who they identified as the shooter. So there is that. Um, there's been the Bondi Beach massacre, which I want to have a conversation about in a moment. And there has also been the US troops that were killed in Syria. Now, my thing, when that happened, my thought is, and why are they in Syria? If they were at home, they wouldn't have gotten killed, right? I don't blame soldiers for that. I blame the people who put those soldiers in that position. As for Bondi Beach, just in case somebody was living under a rock somewhere, 15 people were killed, 27 people hospitalized, two shooters, a father and a son. One is, I think he was 50, and the other one was in his 20s. Yeah, 50-year-old Sajid Akram and his 24-year-old son, Naveed Akram. They put on a shooting clinic, um, murdering several people who were apparently going for the Jewish holiday or some kind of Jewish commemoration. Um, one of the gentlemen who wrestled the gun away from them was Muslim, got shot twice trying to wrestle the gun away. And I think he did wrestle the gun away from one of them, even though he got shot twice in the process. Netanyahu comes out, calls the guy, I think he called him Jewish. Not so much. He was a Muslim. The ages of the people who were shot All right. Let's try this one more time. I don't know if this is StreamYard or if this is the Wi-Fi signal here. Either way, we'll work it out. We don't have time. All right. Mark is going to be here shortly. In fact, he's going to be here in, I don't know, give or take 2 minutes. After Dan Kovalik, we'll have a conversation about Bondi Beach because I want to get into that. I am, my feelings on this are very brutal, if I'm being bluntly honest with you. And I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it in a way that doesn't get me banned off YouTube. That's how brutal my feelings are. Understand, all of us have sat here and watched for the last 3 years Palestinians, men, women, children, babies, get slaughtered remorselessly with the major powers of the world, particularly the European powers, the United States, Russia and China, effectively continuing to back, even though they may snipe, but for all intents and purposes, continuing to do business, sell products. And from the European side, on some level, give political cover, not to mention money and resources, to a genocidal state of squatters as they went about heinous murder on a mass scale. Hundreds of thousands of people being slaughtered in the most horrific ways. Israel raped a man nearly to death. They caught it on camera. And the majority of the population, I think it was like 60%, said that's fair game. That should be okay. Not only is it okay to continuously murder the number of people who we are murdering, but even rape is fair game. The state that did that calls themselves a Jewish state. They call themselves a Jewish state, meaning, whereas I make a distinction between Jews and Zionists, the state doesn't. I want to step into this when we get the opportunity. But my man is here. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay this morning or this afternoon?
Tomorrow, I'm alive. How the hell are you? Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
And just for people to know, you can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty, under Real Politics with Mark Sleboda. All of his videos, all of his insight is effectively on that location. Definitely check him out. Great analyst, to put it mildly. Mark, I'm doing okay. My internet signal is a bit dodgy, so I had to switch to my phone. So hopefully there's not going to be any issue with it, and we can make it through the 3 hours for the day, and I'll flip back. I'll figure out how to fix it by tomorrow.
Is that your real background?
That is indeed my real background. That is indeed my real background. Yeah. You're impressed, right? Impressed.
Actually, I was going to say it hurts my eyes, but I'm a creature of the darkness, so.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's the apartment is nice. I can't complain. Can't complain. Got a question. The Turkish ship, and I guess there are 3 questions that I want to hit, but the first one, the Turkish ship in Odessa port. In fact, I guess it was 3 ships that got damaged. But I watched this video where it looks like a drone flew in and effectively decimated a Turkish ship. And I kept thinking to myself, is this a message to Erdogan? What's going on with this?
Yeah, so there was a major Russian attack on Odessa port.
Yes.
And the Odessa region. And this involved hundreds of drones. It also involved ballistic missiles, Iskander ballistic missiles. It involved Caliber cruise missiles, and reportedly it also involved Kinjal hypersonic missiles, as well as a large number of Garans. And there was specifically, obviously targeted, was a Turkish cargo ship that was docked and evidently had been there for some time. It didn't just arrive. And although initial reports were that it was hit by an Iskander, a ballistic missile, that because the reports were coming out as I was doing my own week in review on Friday, and the reports were just coming out, and I reported as they were that it was a Iskander ballistic missile. But later the videos came out, and it does appear to be a Garan Type 3 drone that hits it, doing the damage. Now, this ship, was on its face a Turkish flagged civilian vessel. According to Russian sources, of course, it was carrying both military equipment and electrical repair equipment.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. It's open knowledge that Turkey has been supplying military vehicles, ammunition, artillery shells, for the Kiev regime all along, right? This is Erdogan being classic Erdogan, the cunning beast, not only playing both sides off of each other, but profiting off of both sides. He does business with Russia and sells Russian oil and gas to Turkey, that he essentially launders with others, and then transfers to Europe as non-Russian gas, just like India does with oil. And he conducts normal trade with Russia. Turkey is highly dependent on Russia, for instance, for energy, right? It's their primary energy supplier, and so on. But at the same time, he sells military equipment to the Kiev regime. So he's been profiting off both sides of this affair. And so now it wasn't just, of course, this cargo ship. There were extensive port facilities, energy infrastructure. Odessa is blacked out, right? I mean, completely cut off from power. And that, of course, is affecting heating and running water, too. And the last report that I saw, the Kiev regime officials still days later have no idea when they're going to be able to restore power to the majority of Odessa. So it was a strong, massive definitive hit, and letting us know that the Kiev regime is teetering on the edge of, on the precipice with their energy infrastructure at this point. Russia has them to the point, I think, the point they want, where they can literally shut down either large parts of the electricity grid or the entirety of it at will. And the Kiev regime increasingly has very limited power to conduct repairs. And this is in large part due to Russian increase of production and the capabilities of the Garan, of the long-range strike drones that all make all of this cost-effective, right? Because the Kiev regime, first of all, the energy infrastructure in Ukraine was built by the Soviet Union. So it was built with incredible amount of redundancies and options for rediverting power, and it was made to be resilient. So Russia had to spend a considerable amount of resources degrading that down, and also the ability of the Kiev regime to repair it. Now they have very limited repair parts and capability left. And the whole Soviet electrical system is not compatible with Western electrical supplies. So it's not like they can simply replace substations and the like. making it very difficult. In fact, the Kiev regime has actually been getting electrical repair supplies via Azerbaijan for some time. Azerbaijan also having a Soviet legacy, and Azerbaijan for some time continuing to buy these supplies from Russia and then reselling them to Ukraine until Russia put a stop to that. But that was continuing for some time. Global economy, right? There's ways of Russia has found many ways of doing things through middlemen and third partners, despite sanctions and secondary sanctions and everything else. So, but hitting this cargo ship, of course, was a message to the Kiev regime. Putin outright said, right? I mean, this was a message not only to the Kiev regime, but to its Western backers. And despite his shall we say, a unique position of playing both sides of the other, that does also include Turkey, because Turkey has been supplying the Kiev regime with weapons, and they are a part of NATO. So that needs to be, even if they have a unique geopolitical position that gives them, shall we say, a degree of independence and agency that most other members of NATO don't have. So a warning first to the Kiev regime that if you continue your attacks on civilian ships in the Black Sea that are doing trade with Russia, and let's recall there have been 4 of them so far, and none of them were Russian flagged ships, right? So 3 of them were oil tankers, and they were on their way to pick up oil in the port of Novorossiysk and then take it to India or to China or to Turkey or wherever. And one of them was simply a sunflower, a tanker carrying sunflower oil. And that one was hit not with unmanned boats, not with surface water drones, but with regular aerial UAVs, drones. So there have been 4 such attacks in the last 2 weeks. And Putin outright said, if you do this, we have 2 options, right? We can quid pro quo, and this was a definitive message to the Western countries that support Kiev regime. We can go after any civilian traffic that aids the Kiev regime, and we know that you're transporting a lot of weapons on a lot of this civilian traffic. I mean, you may think that we don't know, but we do know. So there's that. And then if it becomes necessary, we can just shut Odessa port down completely, right? And a lot of Russian analysts have noted that these attacks really just give Russia, the primary thing they do is actually to make it really impossible for Russia to end this conflict without taking Odessa. Because they see how it can be used against them and will be used against them in the future. And so, again, a historically Russian-speaking, city, it gives them all the further justification and pretext they need to take Odessa. But they have multiple options for shutting down Odessa, and we saw part of that this weekend. We saw both. Putin replied actually in both ways, because he hit this cargo ship at port in Odessa, but he also hit another cargo ship that was in that was at sea, Ukraine's exclusive economic zone as well. That was also hit. But they also hit Odessa port infrastructure and electrical infrastructure in a big way. And that's, one way Russia could shut down Odessa that way. I mean, one such attack is not going to completely shut them down, but let's just say that losing the electrical infrastructure to, power to all of Odessa, well, that prevents things from being processed at the docks as well, right? I mean, it stops transportation, it stops trains from carrying stuff away, stops the lifting crane, stops everything. So Russia has other options, though. For instance, they could easily flood the entirety of the waters around Odessa with sea mines. That's cheap. Russia has plenty of them. They can be dropped. They can be released from submarines. They can be dropped from planes. They can be dropped from drones. There's all sorts of ways. Russia doesn't even have to put their navy at risk of attack in order to do that. But Putin has already responded, and he responded quicker and more forcibly than it should be said that I predicted when I was initially reporting on this. So he's taking this extremely seriously. He warned, we will hit, if you hit civilian ships that are doing trade with us, and again, there have been 4, none of them Russian flagged, they were none of them Russian owned. You can refer to them as Russia's shadow fleet, but they're not Russian. Shadow fleet just means ships that aren't insured in London, right? And they're just part of maritime commerce, right? They're ships that are owned, either by a captain or a company that sees that money can be made by picking up oil or some other product in Russia and taking it somewhere else, or vice versa, and taking it to Russia. And you can call that shadow fleet all you want, but all it is the global maritime shipping industry for most of it. Russia doesn't actually own most of it, right? So that is an attack, again, on really global economy. And what we see here, as with its own patron, the United States, as we've seen in the Caribbean, and as we found out in the Wall Street Journal about an attack on a Chinese ship in the Pacific that was on the way to Iran. These are acts of state piracy. The U.S. long makes this justification for its saber-rattling naval parades up and down off the Chinese coast, the Russian coast, freedom of navigation. Well, the only real threat to the freedom of navigation and to free maritime commerce in the world is the United States and its allied client states like the Kiev regime, as we're seeing in the Black Sea. And it has to be said that Russia is responding in kind, right? The Ukrainian side attacked civilian ships doing trade with Russia, and they attacked international energy infrastructure on Russian territory. They also multiple times attacked, by the way, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium at the port of Novorossiysk, and this is internationally owned. It doesn't. Most of the gas it transports, the energy it transports, is not even Russian. The majority of it is Kazakh. Some of it is Turkmen, right? The ownership of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, the U.S. companies, Mobil and Chevron, are heavily invested in it, as is the Kazakh state energy concern, and a couple of Russian energy companies. So it's an international consortium. And I said most of the energy transported isn't Russian. It's actually from Kazakhstan and a couple of other Central Asian countries. So that was an attack on global energy infrastructure, really, that are part of the global market. So, and Russia said, we will respond in kind, and Russia has. And they've also, at least temporarily, for the moment, taken down Odessa port as well.
Did Erdogan get the message?
Did Erdogan? Oh yeah, Erdogan got the message, and it should be said that Putin and Erdogan actually had a meeting.
5 hours.
This meeting was on the sidelines of a kind of an international multilateral summit in Turkmenistan that mostly included countries from Central Asia, plus Russia, Turkey, and I believe India and Pakistan were both there as well. And there are Putin and Erdogan did have a meeting on the sides. We of course, don't know everything they talked about, but they did talk about the conflict in Ukraine. And I'm sure from the pictures we show that show both men sitting to each other. I mean, reading body language is really a not good means of doing analysis, but still, it must be said, neither man appears to be smiling, and it is almost certain. But Turkey has put it out, and without casting any specific blame on Russia or on Ukraine, they said that conflict on the Black Sea must end. It threatens everyone, and we've already seen that, because the cost of insurance for all ships, right, particularly but not only on the Black Sea, but particularly on the Black Sea, the cost of insurance for shipping has jumped wildly, of course, since these attacks perpetrated by the Kiev regime began a few weeks ago. So it's already having an expected effect, and we'll see if they continue. If Erdogan is able. There was actually an article in the Atlantic, of all places. And the Atlantic, for those who don't know, is an extremely pro-Western, pro-liberal, very anti-Russian magazine publication, a magazine and online publication. And even the Atlantic had a headline article calling these attacks on civilian tankers an act of desperation by the Kiev regime, by the Ukrainian government, and to hear that admitted by the Atlantic, I mean it means that they really are desperate. I mean, there's no question. That's the very first thing many other people said, that this is a sign of desperation. Now, part of the desperation is, of course, how bad things are going on the battlefield. But another part of the desperation, and another thing that this indicates, is that the Kiev regime / Western, and we know the New York Times has told us that the U.S. was actively assisting the Kiev regime in attacking Russia's oil refineries and oil depots in the past few months. And that was supposed to be some crippling damage to Russian economy that would make Russia come to the negotiating table on American terms to end the conflict. It did not. It did not come even close to that. In fact, we had a report out by Reuters a few weeks ago that admitted this and gave us, some international combined statistics to show this. But evidently, according to the international agencies that collect such data, the Russian refined oil has only for export has only decreased by 3% year on year. That is the combined effect, if we want to call it that, right? No more than that, anyway, of all of these attacks that have been blown up in the Kiev regime and thus Western propaganda to be, half of Russia's oil refining capacity has been destroyed. Russia's in flames. This nonsense about
gas lines
and gas lines and everything. By the way, that was debunked in no less a source than the Moscow Times. Moscow Times, of course, is not a Russian newspaper. It has nothing any more to do with Moscow. It was long owned as a Western information outlet. It was bought up quite a while ago by Dutch, by fronts for the Dutch government. Since the conflict in 2022, they have been kicked out of Russia, and now they're still operating the Moscow Times out of the Netherlands. But there was a report even in there where they did an extensive poll of Russians all across Russia, but particularly in the south, where the shortages were said to be, again, blown out of all proportion with hopium and wishful thinking out of Western and Kiev regime propaganda. They polled people that were car owners. They polled quite a number of them, and what they found was there really wasn't any shortages. That 90% of it was exaggeration. And what is a seasonal thing during August in this part of the country, because it's the subtropical part of Russia, Crimea and the Sochi coast. And August is the vacation month in Russia, and a large portion of the country is on vacation. And a large portion of it, you know, particularly with all the problems with international travel and spending tourist money abroad they have right now for Russian banks being sanctioned, is they do domestic travel like many Americans do, right? They get in their car and they take a vacation within their own country. And there's a lot of Russia to take vacation in. And if you want a beach, you wouldn't believe it, but there are beaches in Russia, right? Again, in this south and the Crimea. Russia's a big country. Yeah, there's a lot of it in the north, but there's some of it in the south too. And that's where these shortages supposedly occurred. And it turns out that most of that was no different than the average seasonal phenomenon of large number of tourists, the Russian touristers on vacation there in the south, filling up their cars, and where lines during that brief period of time is, you know, nothing unusual. And if there were local shortages on, you know, one small privately owned gas station, that no one had any problem then finding another gas station in the same area where that did have gas. So the Moscow Times actually debunked that whole, you know, propaganda myth. That, hey, thanks for that, I'll take it.
Well, speaking of that, you made the point of saying they're in crisis. This is reeks of desperation.
Yeah. And so if the attempts to shut down the refineries didn't work, right, then you choose a softer target, right? And that is the civilian shipping in the Black Sea. It's closer, and you know, it's less well defended and harder to defend, it must be said. And so that's why the desperation. That's why, because the other tactic has failed.
There's also desperation because they've just lost Seversk Fortress City, which
in the northern Donbass, north central Donbass.
Yeah. And this comes immediately after Volchansk, Pokrovsk. Minograd is surrounded with mop-up operations at this point. So all of these are falling back to back to back at this point.
And there's more coming, because Russia is already fighting in Konstantinovka at the southern end of the last defensive line in the Donbass. They're already fighting in Liman, or as the Russians call it, Krasny Liman. They're already fighting in Gulai Polya. Russia did take Kupiansk several weeks ago. Now, the Kiev regime has launched large counterattacks, very intensive counterattacks, as part of a political and PR campaign, counterattacks on Kupiansk and the Kupiansk area that were accompanied by what was supposedly Zelensky posing in front of the stela, you know, the name of the city in big letters, about a kilometer and a half or 2 kilometers outside the city. Although I originally believed that he was probably there, but it might have been recorded earlier. Now there's increasing evidence that this was more green screen magic, because both Russian and Ukrainians have gone there with drones, and there are a lot of very specific details that differ. The damage done to the stela, some local anti-drone nets over the roads there, a lot of things that seem to indicate that this was a fictional, you know, a AI movie assisted, you know, a green screen shot that Zelensky took there. And there's no question there that the Kiev regime is doing very intensive counterattacks there. However, Russia is still in control of Kupiansk city, even if there is heavy fighting on the outskirts of it in the area around it. And in order to do this, the Kiev regime has had to strip forces from everywhere else, particularly in the northern parts of the contact line in Sumy and Chornogov, but also in Western Ukraine. And a lot of these are also fresh conscripts. The Kiev regime is no longer hiding the fact, they're openly admitting they are not conducting training of forced conscripts anymore. They will be trained at the front, on the battleground. That's what they call training. Meat.
It means they're going to die.
Essentially. And the effects of this is, yes, they're able to do a lot of fog of war. Oh, we never lost Kupiansk, and at the same time, we're taking Kupiansk back, and Zelensky's showing up there. But Russia has reignited the contact line in Sumy and Chernigov, of course, taking exploiting the situation. And the Kiev regime, I mean, this is just sacrificing more of their manpower in what are largely pointless and political counterattacks, right? Done for the sake of saying it's for them to argue out one side of their mouth that they haven't taken or they have retaken part of Kupiansk. But the cost of this, right? Because all of these troops are being spent in very manpower intensive counterattacks when they would be much better spent, right, in defensive positions, right? The losses in counterattacks obviously are much higher than they are in defensive positions. And this is especially true when you're using fresh conscripts, because it's much easier to defend the position with an automatic weapon, a trench or something, than it is to storm across, urban assault, under heavy drone attack and the like. That's very difficult. It requires a lot of experience and combat skills if you don't want to end up immediately dead in the process. It's hard enough normally, much less with someone who has no combat training or skills or ability whatsoever. So this is all extremely expensive and futile. It's just another version of the Kursk Fool's Crusade. Again, done for mostly political and PR reasons. And it's one of the reasons why Kiev regime is losing so decidedly at this point, is because they keep throwing away their manpower and resources for political reasons rather than military strategic reasons.
What does it mean that they've taken Seversk? Seversk was supposed to be a fortress city. What's the significance of its loss?
Okay, Seversk is in north central Donbass. For a long time, it was the northern stronghold, the northern pillar, right, holding together Kiev regime forces. There were two north and south strongholds that held what was at one point the rear of the defensive lines. It was Seversk in the north, and Sever literally is north in Russian. So it's like the northern point or the northern stronghold. And the southern one was Ugledar. And Ugledar got taken about a year ago. And that was a tough nut to crack as well. And it must be said, Russia, I mean, there have been fighting in and around Seversk for like 3.5 years. Russia has attempted multiple times to take Seversk, and they have failed every time, often with heavy casualties. The geography made it unique. The geography and the extensive fortifications, including underground tunnels and underground fortifications and everything, it made it very tough. And eventually what Russia had to do is clear out the entirety, often burning out, the entirety of the Serebranka forest just to the north of Seversk, which was always being used as a reserve, as a shield, right? Because the Kiev regime has made good use of forests, foliage throughout this conflict, helps protect them and hide them from drones and reconnaissance and the like, artillery as well. So Russia had to clear all of that out to the north, extending all the way to the west, and really do the deep flanking pincher attacks on the supply lines, even as they engaged one side. But it's finally taken. And what it does, again, so first of all, much like Pokrovsk to the south, and geography-wise, Seversk is straight to the north from Bakhmut, right? And it was the last position that far to the east, and the highest position that far to the north. So it's on elevated heights around the city. So that allows Russia to now look down to the west, right? And in military strategic terms, Seversk has long in the conflict been referred to as the eastern gateway to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. And Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are, this last defensive line of the Kiev regime in the Donbass. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinovka.
Wow. Okay. So this is significant. Meaning,
it is strategic. Yeah, it's very significant, right? Kupiansk is a similar in the north, right? Because it is in the southern Kharkov region, and Kupiansk, right? And there's also Russia's also involved in Liman, very close to that. And once you take Liman, right, that leads you right into the smaller settlement of Izium that Russia also once held, and that is the northern gateway to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk.
So they're being surrounded.
Where they get the supply lines from. Yeah. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk together are going to be put into an operational cauldron where Russian forces will, within a couple months, be moving on them from the east, from the north, from the south, and even to a degree from the west. And they will have their supply lines cut. And Russia will have all of the elevated heights in a semicircle around them, and that topography does matter in these conflicts for artillery and reconnaissance and a lot of other uses. And it will be very hard to defend those two cities. And it's really, those will be the last holdouts of the Kiev regime in the Donbass. I expect that they will be taken by the summer, by the end of the summer, certainly, probably by the summer. And it's kind of very coming full circle because the Russian spring, the uprising in 2014 against the Kiev regime, overthrowing the government, the Maidan Putsch, backed by the West, seizing power in Kiev, overthrowing the government. The resistance to that began in the Donbass in Slavyansk. So this was originally the heart of the rebellion in the east about what had happened in Kiev. And it will be the last to be retaken. So it all and once that is taken, right, then Russian forces, they will not pause. They will move right in the north, right, against Kharkov city. They're already moving from the north of the Kharkov region as well. And they will move west in a big way into Dnipropetrovsk and into the Dnieper. They will move very quickly to the banks of the Dnieper River because there just isn't much there past this last Donbass defensive line until you get to the banks of the Dnieper River, to the bigger cities there like Pavlograd, like Dnipropetrovsk, and so forth. But it will mean a collapse of the Kiev regime's entire positions, first in the east, but then in the north as well.
Let's do counter history for a moment. Let's pretend for the moment that instead of doing the counteroffensive that was supposed to sweep away all of the Russian military and the defensive lines were going to fall and everything else, what if they decided to bunker down and just hold, to basically create defensive positions themselves and not do this offensive? How would this look different?
Which specific counteroffensive do you mean? You mean since the beginning of the conflict, or specifically
the big counteroffensive that they were making promo videos for? I think this was
2023, right? Yeah. That okay. So Russia would have much less progress in the Donbass at this point. They might still be fighting for, Avdiivka. It was very hard for them to grind through this fortress belt that the Kiev, with the assistance of the West, had built up in the Donbass over 8 years since 2014. A lot of people don't understand that this was the most fortified area of the world. more so than the Korean DMZ. I mean, a lot of underground fortifications, bunkers. I mean, very extensive trench networks. And not World War I trenches, right? We're talking. This is, if you want to call this World War drone, I don't know, but whatever this current conflict is, it's a world of difference, between the two of them. So there's no question that I don't think that it would have ended, but Russia would have much less progress because the Kiev regime would they wasted so many resources in the south, right, in that NATO trained, armed, planned, executed offensive, right, in the Zaporozhye, where they couldn't break through Russia's first of 5 echelon defensive lines, the Surovikin line. And then they lost an almost equal amount of equipment in the northern, this not counteroffensive, but offensive into the Kursk region that netted them absolutely nothing strategically. It was entirely PR. I mean, maybe they meant to seize a nuclear power plant in Kursk. They didn't get anywhere really close to it. Maybe they wanted tactical nuclear weapons that may or may not have been stored there locally, but it was after the initial failure, right? And then it simply became about politics and PR, and they lost again so much Western equipment in that, and we see that now because they have a shortage of air defense, of infantry fighting vehicles, of tanks, of everything vehicle wise. And they would have much more of this with which to conduct and assist. Ultimately, defense has to be done by infantry, of course. But again, how many experienced infantry did they waste during these offensive and counteroffensives that could have been made much more costly to Russia if they had been holed up in defensive positions rather than wasted on attacks, where invariably you suffer greater losses, especially when you have a deficit of artillery and a deficit of air power and a deficit of everything else. That makes your attacks that much more costly.
I hate to bring this up because I find it to be kabuki theater. I found it to be a clown show, but apparently, the United States is in negotiations with various European leaders and Ukraine in Berlin. The talks, I think they let out today, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember if they're going back for a third day, but nevertheless, the talks are apparently taking place. This seems to be pointless, and I don't. Give me your take on this. I mean, they're putting so much energy into
arguing with each other.
Yes.
Because that's all they're doing at this point.
And Zelensky's like, well, here's my plan for this. And he's effectively agreeing without agreeing. Like, he's not agreeing.
No, he's not agreeing. Well, I'm not right out saying I don't accept this, right?
Exactly.
There was a West Side, I don't know if it was the Walpo or someone else, but they said Trump, Zelensky is, defying Trump's peace plan by rewriting it, or agreeing by rewriting it. Right? Yeah, they're just politely saying yes, but and we're going to change everything. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's to be fair, that's probably what Russia would have done too if the chalice had passed to them first. But I think, I mean, in simple necessity of form, the Trump administration, or at least Trump and part of his inner cadre, because I don't believe that even the Trump administration is behind this, is trying to get their ducks in line first, which is to say the Kiev regime and the Europeans. And supposedly after that, then they can present a united, really, I mean, they can call it a peace plan, but ultimatum to Russia, at which Russia can say no, or that's very interesting. And we consider this a good basis for actual negotiations, which can now begin and will only take several years to complete. Right? I mean, that will, right? That's Russia's not even right now. They're just sitting back going, Are you ready yet? Are you, can we stamp this no yet? Are you ready? And they can't. Trump obviously lacks the power. He lacks the political ability and the political capital to force the Kiev regime. It's amazing because we've seen Yermak be fired, which was almost certainly done, right? On a green light from the United States, in control of Nabu and Sapo, which they helped set up. And supposedly they have a lot more dirt directly on Zelensky and the former defense minister, Umerov, who is now in Washington. Supposedly that he has been holding intensive discussions with the FBI. Why would that be? That would have to be that they're reading them the riot act. You will agree to this, or we will turn back on the corruption investigations. And we know Umerov is already fingered, and certainly Zelensky will be as well. But it doesn't seem to be having an effect thus far. Take that for what it's worth. Also, the Europeans are just in flagrant defiance of Trump without outright saying so. But I mean, the new U.S. national security strategy made clear, right? Trump's, if it was at any point in question, that Trump's contempt for the European political ruling elite, and that he basically declared them enemy number one. Right. Yeah. The one that he was most emotional about, certainly, and most concerned about. He talked about the European. He didn't talk about the Russian or Chinese in democracy deficit terms. He talked about Europe in democracy deficit. He turned that hypocritical moral megaphone, instead of on the geopolitical enemies, on the political enemies in the West. Right. And he made clear that he was going to conduct regime change operations against the European ruling liberal elite, and trying to bring to power what he called a repressed populist conservative right in these countries. Right. I mean, that's what's going on. And von der Leyen can cry it being political interference in Europe all she wants. But the truth is that the European countries long interfered in American politics by taking the side of all of Trump's domestic political opponents over the last 3 election cycles. I mean, openly, right? They openly interfered. The British in particular actually sent operatives to assist Harris. That was on the front page of Western papers, right? So there's really no doubt about it. Now, revenge is a dish best served cold. It's payback time. And that was enshrined in the new national security strategy. So Europe, but he hasn't been able to force them to take his, again, calling it a peace plan. It's not a peace plan, right? It is an ultimatum to the Russians that Russia, even in its original form, it is an ultimatum to the Russians that even in its original form, Russia would have said no to, or a qualified no, right? They called it a basis for future talks and negotiations. That's no, we don't agree to this, right? But we can talk, right? That is what they said. But they haven't. Trump can't even get his ducks in a row, right? He threatened to cut off military and intelligence aid to Zelensky unless if Zelensky signed his 28-point plan by Thanksgiving. Well, the turkey's already cooked and eaten. I mean,
well, now it's supposed to be by Christmas, by the way.
Yeah. We're already on Christmas, and now supposedly there's a new peace plan and a new deadline that Trump wants to have this whole thing wrapped up in peace in Ukraine by Christmas. Why does he set himself up like this so repeatedly for things that he's never going to be able to do? I don't know. But he obviously hasn't learned his lessons. And he still can't get the Europeans or the Kiev regime to agree to even the original terms that Russia would have denied, much less this new stuff. And the Russians can just sit back. They're going through this diplomatic charade, through this game for diplomatic reasons, right? To show that they are the adults in the room, the mature statesmen, if they can meet their goals diplomatically, right? They're showing the rest of the globe, the global South, how reasonable they are compared to the West. But they have not let it ever interfere with the operations on the ground. They've long said, however you wrap this up in a ribbon, right, and call a pig something else, it's still a ceasefire. It is still a freezing of the conflict. What we have always said we will not do, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Trump's 28-point plan was. And we know that whatever is still emerging is going to be much worse, or further from Russian terms than that. And that was already unacceptable. So, we've done this. We've already done this before, right? And then it's going to fail again. And, then the blame game of who's more responsible for denying Trump his Nobel Peace Prize. Is it Kiev? Is it Europe? Is it Russia? That game will start. And then, then there'll be some recriminatory sanctions and threats of transferring weapons. And we'll go through all of this again. And it's not going to be resolved by any of that. It's going to be resolved on the battlefield until there is an unconditional surrender of the Kiev regime at whatever point it takes to do that, whether that's the Donbass, whether that's the Dnieper, whether that's Kiev, whether that's Lvov and the Polish border. I don't know, but we're not there yet. Neither side. Everyone wants peace in Ukraine on their terms, and everyone doesn't want peace in Ukraine unless it's on their terms. And we're still at that point, and it will have to be until it is finally and undeniably settled on the battlefield.
Is that where you think the Russians' mind is at this point? That these negotiations aren't going anywhere. This is going to be settled on the battlefield, and negotiations will catch up.
I think that's pretty clear, right? I mean, Putin doesn't say that outright, but there are allowed other people within the Kremlin decision-making body, the Security Council, that are allowed to speak their mind. And of course, the most frank among those is Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and prime minister, and still the deputy chair of the Security Council. And he has made perfectly clear that that is exactly Russia's position on all of this.
So effectively, all of this other stuff is just
background
drama and theater.
Yeah. I mean, if it amuses you, then take amusement from it. Personally, I already find it a bit annoying, right?
Yes.
I literally cringe when I have to talk about it, right? But
that's what I hate to bring it up. I mean, because we've done this, right?
We've done it again and again, and we're gonna do it again and again and again, and all that matters is the attrition of the Kiev regime military, of the West being increasingly unable to replace military supplies to the Kiev regime because they're out, their stockpiles are empty, and Russian, the cities that were under the control of the Kiev regime, one by one, vanishing into the embrace of Mother Russia. If it's a village and a town at a time, then it's a village and a town at the time until the end.
Yeah, however long it takes. It's just however long it takes. One last question before I let you go. The finances, the money that Europe has just frozen indefinitely.
Another circus, yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently there's a block of countries that have now been against it. It seems, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems that Trump is trying to, let's say, break up the European Union or create blocks in the European Union where the U.S. gets more influence from the standpoint of goods, but also political influence.
Okay, Europe on its own cannot afford to continue supporting Ukraine even for another year, right? Because it takes about 100 billion euros a year just to keep the lights on of the Kiev regime, especially considering how much of it has to vanish into the corruption black holes, which is just part of the costs of doing business with them.
Was it April 2026? is
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
they're
run.
already talking. Yeah,
Yeah,
that they're facing economic, having
oblivion.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it won't happen overnight. They'll start printing hryvnia, the Ukrainian currency, and then everything, the economy will just start to unroll, and the hryvnia will very quickly become worth nothing, and then we'll have that hyperinflation and
Mhm.
everything going on. But um, so the Europeans, they're facing a lot of times. Oh, if we just continue this, the next round of sanctions, Russia's economy is going to collapse. European economies are a lot closer to collapse than the Russian are, right? I mean, literally, the United Kingdom, France, Germany is deep in recession. Their automobile industry is just, I mean, the prize of the German economy is just fading day by day. Volkswagen is now shutting down factories in Germany
Yeah.
itself, and all of the European economies are suffering to one degree or another. So
Sitting
they
at
cannot
money.
afford to fund the Kiev regime for another year, much less longer than that, unless they steal Russia's money to do it. And the problem with that is that it will shut down Euroclear, right? Because what can be done to Russia could be done to any Arab country, in the future, and they won't like that, and they won't keep their money there.
Right.
And you have, so let's line up who is opposed to it. First of all, Euroclear itself is opposed to this, right? The CEO is begging them not to do this, that this will mean the end of Euroclear and Belgium and the euro as a currency, right? The European Central Bank says not a good idea. The International Monetary Fund says don't do it, right? The UK banks, which aren't a part of the EU, but there's another 8 billion held, a smaller amount in the UK, and Starmer's planning actually on doing it first to encourage the Europeans along. And the city of London, the bankers of London, are saying, "Don't do this. Don't seriously, don't do this." So in country wise, of course, Hungary and Slovakia are against it, and Belgium is against it because that's where Euroclear is. They would be held responsible for a lot of it, and they would be the first assets that Russia would counter seize in Russia, Belgian assets, right? And now Italy, and I believe Malta in the last few hours has come out. And of those, Italy at least is a country of, size and note in Europe, right? That does have some degree of influence. So they're the bloc that has come out against this. Most of those pushing for it, the strongest are the UK outside of Europe, Merz in Germany, and a cadre of Germans in charge of EU technocratic institutions, led by von der Leyen, right, as head of the European Commission. So they're the ones pushing for it. But they don't technically them trying to dictate this is really outside of their powers. And Euroclear, they've said, we'll take you to court if you try to order this. And Russia is already taking Euroclear to court. They announced the court case. They're taking Euroclear. The first of many court cases over this in a Moscow City arbitration court. But eventually, this will be taken to courts, international courts, where Euroclear has significant assets most likely in Asia. Courts that the Europeans don't control, like Singapore or Hong Kong or something like that, where Euroclear has lots of assets that can be seized, as a response, to that. And everyone understands that Russia would win that court case because this is a clear case of sovereign immunity, right? The only way that you can legally get this money is by declaring war. And what they're trying to create a legal fiction we're not taking that Russian money. We're using it as collateral for reparation loans that will be given to Ukraine. And then once Russia pays reparations at the end of this conflict to Ukraine, which it will never, ever do, right? Then Ukraine can pay the loan back and Russia can get their money back, right? You see this ridiculous it's legal. It's not even, there's nothing legal about it. It's just rhetorical, semantic chicanery.
Yeah.
And everyone understands that it's all make believe. But then so much of the modern economy in the world is make believe. It shouldn't really come as any surprise to anyone. But the thing is, Russia has already written this money off. They know they're never going to get their money back. All this is doing is hastening the economic suicide of the European Union.
But that's a lot of money. And up to this point, they haven't been able to get their hands on it. Do you think ultimately they're going to steal?
That's not true. That is not true, because they've been siphoning off the interest from it already, which is already something that Russia will eventually take to court, right? But they've already been, it's just the trickle that they've gotten out of it, right? The bloodletting has not been enough. It's no longer anywhere near enough. So now they have to go for the whole carcass, right? That's,
you think they're going to be able to get it? I mean, I think you said before that you think ultimately they will be able to steal the money.
Yeah, I mean, if they eventually, here's the problem. They're actually running into opposition. I don't want to say from the U.S. because it's not from the U.S., but from Trump and a cadre around him. Because there is one of the points of Trump's 28-point police plan that has some vague notion of how to deal with Russia's currency, right? And saying, well, a third of it should be given back to Russia, and a third of it should go for reconstruction in Ukraine, and then a third of it should go to Trump. I mean, Trump's got to get his pay, right? Trump's got to make money off of everything, and so that is literally then taking what Trump considers his money away from him, and the Europeans are real angry that team, Witkoff and Kushner put that in the original 28-point plan, because they see that as blocking their attempt, and they're just trying to ignore and pretend. And I don't know if that's already been written out of. I mean, how many plans are there now? I mean, I've lost count.
Oh, there are a lot.
I know 2 weeks ago that 5 plans were presented to Russia, right? And now there's new ones, and the new ones are emerging supposedly after negotiations today. Again,
and by the way, the Europeans were supposed to put $100 billion in the pot themselves, if you remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. According to Trump's 28-point plan, for reconstruction in Ukraine too. Yeah, $100 billion that they don't have. Yeah, right. So
it's just outrageous.
This is such a circus. I mean, we have to report on it. It's what's consuming the Western papers, rather than, of course, the grim reality of what's actually happening on the battlefield and them creating fictions and PR stunts and everything around that. But, the grind and the slog continues. And like I said, every day, another town, another village, another, 50 square kilometers vanish into the embrace of Brother Russia. And Ukraine is pretty big, and it will take a time. I mean, we are seeing an acceleration, and there is every reason to believe that acceleration will only continue. And at some point, right, they will fall. I don't like to use the collapse word. We've seen some localized crumbling, but yeah, eventually it will. Now, at some point, I mean, we've heard Macron threaten multiple times, right? We've now seen British troops definitively die in quote unquote tragic accidents in Ukraine. The pressure to put more European troops in Ukraine as human tripwires will increase. But I am less worried about that than ever. And I have no doubt that the European militaries are not able to present any type of serious threat to Russia in Ukraine. None of them. Not all of them together. Not any of them. No. All they're going to do is get themselves killed and cry for America. And now we know that Trump has very little power and decision-making ability in Washington. That's been made perfectly clear, right? Against the blob, the deep state, Congress, everything else. But it would be very hard for the U.S. to commit troops to direct war with Russia in Ukraine. once the Europeans start crying, if Trump was decisively against it. That would be difficult for them. It would cause a political crisis inside the United States. So that would also play to Russia's advantage.
Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can follow Mark on Boosty at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, or you can just put in his name. He will appear. Mark, you are fantastic. Thank you for this, man. Great breakdown.
Thanks for having me.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. Shout out to Mark. We are waiting on Carl Jha. He is supposed to be joining us. I don't want to go into another story because the moment I go into another story, Carl will appear. I will point this out though, because I'm going to hit this with Carl. The U.S. intercepts, Mark mentioned it himself, U.S. Special Ops intercepts Chinese military shipment headed to Iran. U.S. officials said the cargo was bound for Iranian companies that acquired parts for Tehran's missile program. Who the F are you? Right. Who the F are you? How are you stopping somebody else's ship and saying, hey, we don't like the fact that your ship is going to Iran? Who the F are you? Iran, and I think I predicted this. I don't know if I said it on air, but I think I was talking to somebody and said, well, Iran is going to take one of their ships next. And here we are. Iran seized this ship carrying, I think it was like 6 million liters of oil or something to that effect. $6 million liters of, quote, smuggled fueled, unquote, IRIB footage day after the United States captures a transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela to Iran. That was the other thing. Of course, you saw the United States jumping off of helicopters onto the ship in order to steal the ship that was apparently going to Venezuela, from Venezuela to Iran. So piracy, just outright sublime, overt piracy. That's effectively what we're seeing. Tit for tat, you hit my dog, I kill your cat. This is effectively the game that is being played among these nations. Now, the key part to this that I find interesting is something that Brian Beletic always talks about, with this plan for the United States to be able to block off shipping lanes for China. And Brian makes this argument that this going after boats in the Caribbean, going after the Chinese shipping, going after the Iranian shipping or Venezuela shipping is just a prelude to them effectively becoming more proficient at trying to, let's say, interdict ships from the standpoint of China getting goods from point A to point B. Now, China's response to this has been obvious, right? It's been increasing overland routes of getting products to local locations, Belt and Road being one of those ideas in the making in order to kind of get around this. But either way you look at it, you would think that this will come to a head. Now, China has one of the largest navies on the planet. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have the largest navy on the planet. They are building boats like hotcakes, and the United States is having trouble building boats, and it definitely, even if it could, can't necessarily keep up with the Chinese industrial base. If this is indeed a problem, it seems like it is a temporary one, or it's a problem of gumption from the standpoint of the Chinese putting their foot down saying, fuck off. Will they do it? China has been less inclined to get involved in this stuff militarily. So will they do it? I have no idea. I'm waiting on Carl. Let me make sure he's still coming. He's still coming, Carl. All right. So I'm going to go into, let's talk about Bondi Beach. I'm going to piss some people off in this monologue. I'm trying to figure out a way to put this in the least offensive way as possible. When I finally got here yesterday, a day before yesterday, yesterday, I look on my Twitter feed and it's just chaos. You get American troops dying in Syria, being killed in Syria by ISIS, which is ironic considering that Donald Trump thought the head of ISIS in Syria was a great guy with a strong past. But now all of a sudden he's outraged. It's like, dude, you need to make up your mind. Which one do you want? I watched an active shooter at Brown University. I think it was Brown University. And what makes it so bad, they get it wrong. They name the wrong person at Brown University. This came out where they're effectively apologizing for releasing the name of the person.
Speak a little bit about shortly. We will be releasing the person of interest who had been detained earlier today, and the Attorney General can speak a little bit about the rationale for that. But we want to inform the community that that individual will shortly be released from Providence Police.
And they did release him. It was the wrong guy. So there's that. And of course, you had Bondi Beach. Now, the Bondi Beach one is the one I want to focus on for a bit, because I've watched a lot of the media reports and a lot of the talking about it, a lot of the corners that have been bringing this up. And it makes me hate everybody. It just makes me hate everybody. So right here, there's 15 people that are killed, 27 people that have been hospitalized. This was the shooting at Sydney's Bondi Beach. I don't think I've ever been to Bondi Beach. I think I've been to Man Beach. So I don't know what this beach looks like. There were a father and son duo, seemingly very well trained, that went on an execution spree. Now, it was 50-year-old Sajid Akram, a 24-year-old son, Naveed Akram. Both were born in Australia. His father was killed at the scene. I'm sorry. The son was born in Australia. His father immigrated to the country in 1998. All right. This was declared a terrorist attack. They were going after Jewish Australians. There was apparently some kind of event commemorating, I don't think it was Hanukkah, but I could be wrong. But maybe it is Hanukkah. But either way, a Jewish event. They were obviously going after the Jews that were there in Australia. The ages went between 10 to 87 that were killed. And so you can imagine this ended up being a huge story. Now, the person who helped disarm one of the attackers was a Muslim man, Ahmed Al-Ahmed. Netanyahu comes out and claims that this guy was Jewish. He's not Jewish. He's Muslim. He's in a hospital with 2 bullet wounds because they turned fire on him the moment that he disarmed one of the attackers. All right. Netanyahu also, by the way, is trying to politicize this and try to claim that the Iranians or Hezbollah was directly involved and had something to do with this, and apparently are working in regards to with the Australian authorities for an investigation. So they've effectively turned something like this into a political weapon that they're effectively using. All right, that's the background. This will sound brutal, but I've become callous. And it's just my truth. I don't want to see anybody who's innocent get killed. Period. That's my default. By the same token, I've watched innocent men, women, children, babies get slaughtered in some of the most horrific killings that we could watch on social media every day. What does it do to a person when you're watching innocent people get slaughtered? As I pointed out early on, you get like 80%, if not more, of Israel saying it is fair game to murder as many of these people as possible We don't care if they're children. We don't care if they're women. We don't care. Just kill them all. We're okay with that. They are killing people in Lebanon as we speak. They're killing people in Gaza as we speak. They're killing people in Syria in those bombing rates, and not to mention the West Bank. Nobody cares. Put that in context. We've watched them do this for 3 years, and nobody cares. One country after the next not only continues to trade with Israel as they go on their genocidal murder spree, but also gives political cover as they do so. Nobody cares. Yes, you get people in the various countries that may care, but for all intents and purposes, the governments that are directly involved in this stuff don't care. And when Donald Trump put in his fake ceasefire, everybody went to sleep. That's my context. So when I see this, I think to myself, you have a country that calls itself a Jewish state. That quote unquote Jewish state put on television the rape of a man nearly to death, with everybody can watch, everybody can see. And the majority of the population said that's fair game and that those soldiers should be released. I'm talking about a society. That society calls itself a Jewish state and claims that they're doing this on behalf of Jews and that they speak for Jews. All right. So how are you shocked that something like this happens? Put it in context. You have watched ritualized murder for nearly 3 years on your social media accounts. You can see it. You can see them laugh. You can see them dance. You can see them put on women's clothing and dance around as they murder people. You can see them starve the population. You can see babies walking around like looking like skeletons. And you get the countries of the world not giving a shit. And the moment something like this happens, I'm supposed to immediately give a shit. I've become callous. I've become callous. Again, this is not co-signing what took place. This is me trying to make the point of saying, if life matters, then life should matter. And how do we have this selective outrage in one situation where 19 people get killed? 15 people get killed, 27 injured. But in the other case, less so. How does that work? You have 100,000 people that have been murdered on one side in the name of a Jewish state. You get 15 people that get killed, 27 people in a hospital, and they're supposed to be outrage. Whereas 100,000 didn't seem to matter to any of these countries and to many of the people that were effectively saying, it's perfectly fair game. If you ask Bill Maher would be like, hey man, they deserved it. He's not alone. And if you're talking about countries, they continue to trade with a genocidal colony of squatters. They continue to give weapons, support, and political support to a genocidal colony of squatters as it massacred hundreds of thousands of people, not to mention rape facilities, not to mention blowing up hospitals, not to mention just wanton murder. I can show you video after video after video. One video where an Israeli is just shooting people randomly as they go and try to get food. Now you could say, well, dude, these are two different things. But that's the point. They're not two different things. You have an event, a Jewish event, where the person obviously went to kill Jews. And you have a Jewish state that has been committing mass murder. In one case, people are outraged. In the other case, countries don't seem to care. How do both of these things coexist? I'm trying to make the point that this selective outrage is nauseating. If life should matter, then it should matter, not this one life apparently matters more than the other. It's nonsense. I've become callous. You get callous when you're watching people get slaughtered on a daily basis for nearly 3 years, especially when you realize the rest of the world doesn't give a shit. So I don't want to see any innocent people get killed as an absolute. As an absolute. But have I become callous with the amount of killings, murders, and everything? Yes, I have. And at this point, it seems that life is very cheap in the way that it is dispensed with. Whether that's Palestinian life, whether that's Jewish life. It's unfortunate. But that's what happens when you watch people get slaughtered for 3 years on social media repetitively. I guess my main point is, why do you believe that that wasn't going to happen? Like, think of what I'm asking here. You have watched, quote unquote, Jews, I would say Zionists because I make a distinction between the two, but for all intents and purposes, people who consider themselves and call themselves Jews slaughter Palestinians, starve, beat, kill, dispossess of land, etc. All of the most Nazi shit that a person could do to another group of people. Why do you expect there not to be a response to that? This is not given moral leeway for it. I'm just making a point of saying, as a call issue, why do you think that that wasn't going to happen? It was obviously going to happen at some point as a direct result of the large mass murder and the co-signing of that mass murder by effectively every nation across this planet, with the exception of maybe Iran, Yemen, and Lebanon. Again, just to be very clear, I don't want to see any innocent person get murdered. But when I say that, I mean that as an absolute. I don't mean it in a sense of, well, this person's Jewish, this person's Palestinian, so it's fair. No, I don't mean it like that. The value of life of a Palestinian is equal to the value of life of a Jew. Full stop. For some reason, not everybody believes that. And so many people are screaming selective outrage currently on social media and on mainstream media and everything else when they could not give two shits about all of the murders that Israel has been committing for the last 3 years. That shit is disgusting. It is nauseating. And yes, it makes me callous and it makes me ultimately not care. I don't mean to be a dick about it. I'm just being honest about it. Yeah. Let me see. Let me make sure. See if Carl is coming. Okay. Maybe Carl has blown me off. Okay. Maybe Carl can't do it. So there's that. It's unfortunate. We've had a bloody weekend. We've had a very bloody weekend. Donald Trump bought al-Shara al-Jilani, president of Syria that was unelected, that effectively took Syria over, brought him to the White House, shook the man's hand. And when people pointed out, hey, you know that guy used to run ISIS in Syria, right? Trump didn't seem to care all that much. He said he had a tough pass, good-looking guy. Shook the man's hand, congratulated him on his position, then pushed to remove sanctions and made it look as if, hey, we now have democracy in Syria. Okay. Okay. ISIS And I want to give a shout out to Vanessa Beeley on this, because she pointed out that there's a resurgence of ISIS that are taking place in Syria as a direct result of the way Jelani is functioning. Because many of them don't necessarily like his association with the United States, and for that matter, his association with Israel. And what do you know? You get, I believe it was CENTCOM that put this up right here, U.S. Central Command. This comes up. U.S. personnel ambushed by ISIS gunmen in Syria. December 13th, 2 U.S. service members and 1 U.S. civilian were killed, and 3 service members were injured as a result of an ambush by a lone ISIS gunman in Syria. The gunman was engaged and killed. As a matter of respect for the families, in accordance with the Department of War policy, the identities of the service members will be withheld for 24 hours until the next of kin have been notified. Again, don't mean to be a dick about this. Why were they there? Why were they there? Now, we have been in Syria stealing the oil, stealing the grain. We have effectively backed ISIS. You can go back and look at Obama's policy plan, where he was effectively giving billions of dollars into Syria in order to overthrow Assad. Who do you think that money was going to? The Israelis also backed ISIS, with many of them getting medical treatment and whatnot in Israeli hospitals. So this idea that ISIS is some kind of magical creation and is untethered from Western influence is nonsense. Complete nonsense. Doesn't mean you don't have true believers that feel some kind of way about the United States being effectively occupying Syrian land. Now, the U.S. is apparently doing a bombing campaign. And what's wild about this, when they said bombing campaign, I was like, what? They're going to bomb the presidential palace in Syria? Is that what they're going to do? Because for all intents and purposes, you validated the leader of Syria, who was a leader of ISIS. How do you now get pissed off at ISIS? These things are like U.S. creations or U.S. cutouts. And so this idea that an ISIS fighter attacked U.S. service members, apparently the amount of control that is effectively held by Jelani is tenuous. It sounds very tenuous. Now, Vanessa Beeley pointed out that there will be consequences for his behavior. And this grip on power, even the United States, I believe Marco Rubio even pointed out in testimony that Jelani's grip on power is very narrow. I mean, he only controls a portion of the country, with the rest of the country effectively being balkanized. Trump is going to turn around and say, now we need to have a bombing campaign and a bombing raid in Syria. In which case, there was photos of U.S. airplanes effectively being loaded up as they were flying over Syria, most likely for bombing raids. One of the other things I should note on the Bondi Beach thing also, they are going to use this as a justification to go on further killing sprees. Now, whether they have the balls to go after Iran, I'm doubtful, but who knows? Either way, they're trying to create some kind of context and some kind of precedent where they can justify either attacks in Lebanon or, for that matter, continued attacks in Gaza or the West Bank. And by the way, they have been killing, but they've been killing every day anyway. The ceasefire is nonsense. This is the Brown University thing. While we're hitting what's been taking place over the weekend, this came out. Brown University shooter has been identified as a 24-year-old Benjamin Erickson, NBC News reports. According to Army spokesperson, Erickson served as an infantry in the regular Army from May 2021 to November 2024, had no overseas deployment, but left the Army at the rank of specialist. Authorities said that they are still investigating any potential connection between Erickson and Brown University. A review of public available records showed no indication of any prior criminal history. Then the next thing you know is that they put out our bad for releasing that information, which was this video of them saying it's unfortunate that that information was released. He's not our guy. And we were letting him go. There's another video that came out where they effectively apologized for releasing the content and releasing the information associated with the Brown University shooter. How do you fuck that up? I understand that it is chaos when there's an active shooter on campus. I've never been in that situation, but I do get the level of chaos that you're experiencing. But what that means is that the shooter got away. What that means is that they don't know who the person is, and they finger the wrong guy at the most opportune time of catching the actual right guy. Meaning, as you grab one guy, the other guy's probably escaped. That is a clusterfuck. That is a clusterfuck. And I have to be honest with you, I've even become callous on stuff like this. In the old days, when Obama would come out and sing Amazing Grace at the point where there's a shooter, and he would emote for the rest of the country, and you could feel Obama's pain as he's talking about another person that has been killed, or another student that's been killed, or another random mass shooting that has been taking place. And he would be the guy that would emote for all of us, right? And he was good at it. Joe Biden, not so much. Donald Trump, not so much. None at all, right? But I am 48 years old, and I've watched this phenomena take place in America for decades. And you get to the point of realizing the country doesn't care. Now, you could say, well, people do care, but because people can't necessarily come up with a decision on what to do, that they're bifurcated in regards to their action, meaning because you can't decide on anything, status quo remains status quo, in which case the killings continue. Then there's a secondary question of what would you even do to prevent the killings in the first place? Meaning, even if you had the power to do something, what could you actually do? There's something specific about America that is wrong, that is creating these people, that creating these shooters. And we don't like, Bill Maher liked to always talk about cultural superiority. Dude, I don't know what the fuck you're looking at. There's something inherently wrong. There's something in the culture of this country that is effectively creating people who, for whatever reason, wake up one morning and decide to walk into a building, a church, a school, and take as many lives as they can possibly take in as short of time as they can possibly do it. And it happens over and over and over again. Keep in mind, when I was going to school, we didn't have metal detectors in our schools. As I got older, and by the time we got into high school, I think they were installing metal detectors. Then you would get bulletproof book bags, which is grotesque. Locks on doors. This is not the way kids are supposed to be raised. And yet, this is the way kids need to be raised because we're so concerned about the safety, because we don't know on any random day that somebody's going to walk in with a gun and try to take as many of their lives as possible before probably losing their own life. There's something inherently wrong with that. And it is impossible for us to have any kind of real, honest conversation about it, because ultimately it gets politicized. People will say, oh, you send your prayers. It's a magical thing. It's like an earthquake. It's like a tornado. There's no way to predict it. It just happens. Yeah, it does just happen. But let's be honest, there's most likely a reason for it. If you have a large number of human beings, 320 million in a particular country, and it's happening in your country far more prevalent than it's happening in somebody else's country, then there's something inherent in your country that is provoking that behavior that is not doing so in these other countries. There's no way to have that conversation. There's no way to even have that analysis. Because honestly, if you do that analysis and you come back with the answer, that answer may cut in a political direction that will be impossible to implement, and let alone most likely burned. It's unfortunate. My heart goes out to the people that were killed at the campus. Again, it's just bizarre that this keeps happening over and over and over again. Utterly bizarre. Let me see. There was another story that I want to hit before. What time is it? Okay, we have a few minutes. There's another story I want to hit before Dan Kovalik comes on. So we hit the cargo ship. And yeah, I'm just going to assume the call is not coming. So let's just keep this boat rocking. We hit the cargo ship. Oh, so we were having a conversation with Mark. Oh, this is great. This is great. Kaja Kalis. She is the gift that keeps on giving. She's the gift that keeps on giving. So one of the interesting things that has been taking place in regards to these negotiations is that Zelensky will come back and say stuff like, well, I accept your plan, but I have changes. And the changes that are effectively made kill the plan in order to prevent anything real from taking place in negotiations. I hate talking about negotiations because I find them to be nonsense. But nevertheless, the interesting part about this is that the Europeans are doing any and everything in their power to prevent any real process from taking place. Meaning Trump can't even get his own people on board for him to even go and have a conversation with the Russians, for the Russians to tell him no. Kalis, pretty and dumb. Pretty and dumb. I swear to God, she looks like Max. She comes out and says this. And I can't tell if they fully understand the gravity of what she's saying. Europe has dragged this world into wars twice. Well, multiple times, but in regards to two main big wars that were on some level existential, twice. And if you look at how dumb and psychotic these people are, you can understand that given the chance, they will do it again, especially if they believe they get a blank check from Daddy America. And yes, I'm infantilizing them because they deserve it. It's the way they act. This is Kalis talking about security guarantees because Ukraine, of course, wants security guarantees. The way they quote this, though, is, well, we're not going to be, we will forego NATO for right now. However, we need security guarantees that are similar to NATO. Listen to what she says here. This picture is great. The picture is great.
Well, what we have to keep in mind is that why countries want to be in NATO is because they don't want Russia to invade them, to attack them. And that's why, Sweden and Finland joined NATO. That's why the Baltic states joined NATO, to have this defense umbrella, really. Now, if this is not in question, or this is out of the question, then we need to see what are the security guarantees that are tangible. They can't be, papers or promises. They have to be, real troops, real capabilities, so that Ukraine is able to defend itself. We have to understand that Donbas is not Putin's endgame. If it gets Donbas, then the fortress is down, and then they definitely move on with taking the whole of Ukraine. And if Ukraine goes, then other regions are also in danger. We know this from the history, and we should learn from history.
She's so pretty and dumb. I swear to God. She's so pretty and dumb. Russia has the reason that Russia may take all of Ukraine is because they can't get a deal. This idea that Russia is just chomping at the bit to take all of Ukraine, then take Poland, then take the Baltic states, then take over all of Europe is nonsense. It's complete and utter bullshit. Now, I don't know if she knows that because she's pretty and dumb. But reality is what it is. This idea that you are trying to put troops on the ground or effectively give Ukraine, quote unquote, guarantees, whatever rump state is left, that you give them guarantees. It's like, well, if it can't be NATO, then it needs to be, something similar to NATO. These two things are equal. The entire point and the reason and the rationale for the war was because Ukraine was moving closer and closer to NATO, if not in fact, then de facto. Meaning the moment that you give them, you're working in parallel with NATO, then you're ultimately working in parallel with NATO. You've become a de facto NATO, I don't know what you want to call it, affiliate, if not necessarily in earnest. Russia's rationale, in part, for going into Ukraine was to prevent that eventuality from coming about. Russia's been invaded multiple times through Ukraine. They've lost, 30 million, 40 million people over the course of 2 wars? And these guys are either so dumb or so dishonest where they're like, yeah, we're just a defensive organization. Russia has nothing to be worried about. And flip it on its head of Russia is the issue. Really now? Really? What she is talking about is a pathway to World War III. Be very clear about that. She is trying to ignite a third world war. The moment that you give these sort of guarantees, then you leave it open for a false flag that would provoke a third world war. Mark my words. Trump would be dumb as a box of rocks if he allows something like that. And either way, it would get turned down where Russia effectively tells them no and continues their pace on the battlefield. If you want all of Ukraine to be taken, continue what you're doing right now. I see my man in the background. The one, the only, Dan Kovalik. How you doing, man? You doing okay this morning?
I'm good. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. Better that you are joining me, Dan. And just for the audience to know, Dan Kovalik, he's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist. He previously taught human rights or international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And he is defending Petro Gustavo, correct?
Yep. President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro. Exactly.
I'm sorry. I inverted the names. I'm sorry. Congratulations on that, by the way. I'm always so impressed when I hear that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
By the way, before we get into the story I want to hit, what's the latest on that case?
Well, let's just put it this way. There are discussions happening to deal with that situation. But at this point, I'm not at liberty to say, to give any details on it. So,
okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's on the down low at this point.
It's on the down low. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But talks are being had.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Can you talk around the case about the Hegseth stuff and some of the other killings that are taking place?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a separate matter. I mean, and I am representing the family of one of the fishermen killed by the United States. And we have brought an action on that. And that I can freely talk about.
Has that hit the court?
I mean... What's that?
Has that hit the courts yet? Or it's in the process?
We brought it before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which is a body created under the Organization of American States.
Okay.
It's not one people think a lot about, but actually, it's the rights we're suing under are created by the American Declaration on the Rights and Duties of Man, which is the oldest human rights instrument ever signed. It was signed in Bogota, Colombia in 1948. It's actually known as the Bogota Declaration, colloquially. And that's what we brought the case against the United States.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was there a response on that, or because
Not yet.
I'm
No.
unfamiliar with his body?
Yeah, no,
So,
we filed the petition about 2 weeks ago, just under 2 weeks ago, and there's been no response. But I wouldn't expect one this quickly. So
now, what do they have the power to do?
well, their power is limited to making recommendations. They could recommend compensation for the family, that the U.S. stop these killings. In fact, we're going to file a request for preliminary measures, which would do that, which would tell the U.S. to stop the killings. The truth is they don't have enforcement power. What has enforcement is the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which the commission can refer a case to. However, the U.S. is not subject to the jurisdiction of that court because it never agreed to do that, right? This is a very classic case of where the U.S. wants everyone else to be subject to an international law system, but not themselves. However, we think that with public pressure combined with a favorable ruling from the commission, that we can get the same results. So that's why we brought it there.
What I want to hit you with, thank you for that, by the way. I would love for you to keep me updated on this case.
Absolutely. And by the way, we are thinking of another case of where there I was approached by a congressman's office on this. I won't mention which one at the moment, but that wants to help. And he actually, I didn't know this. There's a procedure to sue the Navy itself for this type of crime, and so that may happen as well. So that's under consideration.
Left wing, right wing?
Congressman? Left wing for sure. You want to guess? Is that you gonna try to get? Oh, it's fine.
If I guess, would you say yes or no?
I'll just say who it is. It's Jesse Jackson's son out of Atlanta.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I was never going to get that. I was never going to.
His office called me, and they're very keen on helping with this. There's a lot of people very disgusted by what's happening. I mean, rightly so.
Well, as they should be. I mean, they're just mass murder, right?
It's murder. It's murder, pure and simple. It's terrorism. If any other country was doing it, if Russia were doing this in the Black Sea, I mean, can you imagine the outcry?
Yeah. China is spraying water on Filipino ships, and they're outraged. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe the Chinese is doing this." Right. Just murdering people en masse. It's just outrageous.
And of course, you saw also that the U.S., of course, I'm sure you've talked about it, hijacked an oil tanker from Venezuela, kidnapped the crew, is stealing the oil. I mean, the U.S. Actually, it was President Maduro who said this. I mean, they're the pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, that's just the truth. They're engaged. The U.S. is engaged in piracy on the high seas. It really is something. And
there's no consequence. That's the wild part.
Yeah, because the U.S. they are governed only by by the law of the jungle, that the mighty rule, and the U.S. certainly is one of the most powerful countries in the world. So they do as they will. Chomsky used to say that. The U.S. does as it will, as it wants, and the poor endure what they must.
I thought that was Varoufakis who said, what is it? The strong do as they may and the weak suffer what they must, or something to that
Yeah,
effect.
well, maybe Chomsky was quoting.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I remember Chomsky saying, of course, now Chomsky, we'll have to talk about Chomsky at some point and his Epstein stuff, which is quite strange. But
yeah, I didn't bring you on to talk about that, but if you want to say something about it, feel free. It's very awkward because Chomsky has been one of those guys that has been this kind of left-wing, considered radical thought leader. And then you find all of the stuff with Epstein. It's just very strange.
yeah, and a person who up till now has been scandal free. I mean, he really has seemed like a rock solid guy, a good father,
Yeah.
a good husband, just like a nice guy with great politics to a point. You know, I think a lot of us thought in his later years he seemed less radical. But in any case, yeah, but now this comes out. Now, first of all, it should be said, there's no inkling that he had anything to do with the, Epstein Island and the girls and all that.
Right.
I don't think that was what was happening. But I think what's disappointing is he seemed to enjoy hobnobbing with these people that he saw as powerful, like Steve Bannon. There's a fairly recent photo of him with Steve Bannon. He said that he flew on Epstein's plane because he wanted to meet Woody Allen, and Epstein was able to set that up, and Epstein was able to move some money for him, basically launder money for him, about $275,000 after his wife died for tax purposes or something. He asked Epstein to move this money around for him. It's just very strange stuff. It just comes off as a guy, let's put it this way, compromised with his connections, not just to elites, but bad, kind of bad elites, if there's any good ones. But and he fawns, there's some statements he made, I think even in writing, where he just fawns over Epstein and how smart he thinks he is and insightful. And it's just,
had he been convicted up to this point?
He had been. All this is happening after Epstein was convicted for soliciting a minor.
Yeah,
of course, Chomsky's response to that is, well, he paid his dues, but okay. I mean, but that's something a lawyer would say. It doesn't make him a great guy.
No.
It doesn't mean he didn't do what he was convicted of, and also it probably shows that he has a propensity for this sort of thing. But none of that seemed to matter to Chomsky. Again, very strange. And the question, the question is, how does Chomsky even get to know Epstein? Who makes that connection? I mean, you get this impression that Epstein just had tentacles everywhere, right?
It's wild. I mean, like the number of people that he's been hobnobbing with, like the political connections, the Hollywood connections, the financial connections, like he's everywhere.
Yes, and it seems that he was doing that to be able to blackmail people. Was that true with Chomsky? I mean, did he think he had something over Chomsky? I don't know. I mean, the whole thing's very strange, and I'd say disappointing. People are people. No one's perfect, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to give him a pass, but he's a person. I mean, it's like, oh, I get to meet Woody Allen. It's that stuff, right? Like, or hey, he can make connections with me for so and so. Meaning, it sounds like transactional relationship where Epstein was getting something out of it. Maybe Epstein just wanted to know Chomsky. Chomsky wanted to know.
Well, yeah, I think that was it. I mean, that could have been it too. I mean, they were enamored with each other, because of their own their respective status. I guess the other thing Epstein did for Chomsky was put him in touch with Barack the former prime minister of Israel.
Mhm.
Again, for what purpose, I don't know. But anyway, there you go. I mean, it's an interesting subject. I'm sure your audience is probably as fascinated by that as anything. But
It's bizarre. When I heard this, I was like, it's just strange. It's like I don't even know. Like, yeah, it's just strange. It's just very strange. And I think the thing is, people wouldn't necessarily think Chomsky would be the person who would do something like this. But again, this is based off reputation, not because any of us know Chomsky, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean, I met him before. I knew
Have
his daughter quite well, and she introduced me to him. I visited him at his office at MIT some
What would
years
you read on
ago.
him?
What's that?
What would you read on him? What did you?
Well, I found him to be a very nice, humble person, actually. I mean, his office was, I mean, nice, and he had assistants and everything. I mean, but it was kind of messy, and he had, stacks of books everywhere. And the only poster he had on his wall was of the 6 Salvadoran priests that were killed in 1989, and also Oscar Romero was on that same poster.
Yeah.
Which I found fascinating. And the most, I mean, in terms of just judging him, I mean, again, this goes against this thing about being a hobnobber. I mean, we were there in the afternoon, like 3-ish, 2-ish, 3-ish, and he hadn't eaten lunch yet. And he said, "Do you mind if I eat my lunch?" And it was just a bagel with American cheese that he brought with him in a little plastic baggie. I mean, again, the guy wasn't eating lobster or anything.
Right.
So, I came away with a very good impression of him. And Avi and all his kids love him. I mean, they said he was a great dad. I mean, and she's made that clear to me. She's like, a lot of people with famous parents, they, a lot of famous people tend to have focused on their work much more than their families, right? And many times maybe to the
Chomsky wasn't
detriment
like
of their
that.
family. She said that was not true with him, and she
Yeah.
had not a bad word for him. So, I mean, that says a lot to me, So I think he's probably a very, there's a lot of good there, and he's probably a good person in many regards. But I don't know. All of us have
Flawed.
things, I guess, we're
Yeah.
tempted
All of us are
by or
flawed.
whatever. And again,
Yeah.
for him, it wasn't women, apparently. I mean, that was not what that was about. Although, as you know, when his wife died, he ended up marrying a woman very much younger than himself. But fine, it's fine.
That's tough, man. Like I went on a date in Malaysia. She was 18 years my junior. That's very awkward. Like it's just a coffee.
No, and this was, I think she was a few decades younger than him. I mean, which still made her in her 40s or something.
Yeah.
Because he's an old guy. But anyway, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. Again,
He's a
I
person.
wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is nothing that I've heard that would lead me to say, "Oh, fuck Chomsky," or so. I don't feel that way. But
Yeah, it's just strange.
it's
just very
interesting. It
Um,
shows what power can do. Well, again, the power that Epstein had. He clearly had power and could do things for people. And he used,
transactional relationships.
well, exactly.
There are two big stories that I want to hit, and you are the person to talk to about them. One is the Bondi Beach shooting.
Yeah.
I am, as I told my audience, I'm very callous at this point. So I want to get your take on it. The other one is the Americans that were killed in Syria by an ISIS gunman. Which
Yeah. Or was it ISIS, or I thought it was even maybe HTS, the government forces. But in any case, yes.
Well, from my understanding, it was the government forces. But the government forces are effectively, many of those people are ISIS.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So let's start with Bondi Beach. Give me your take on that. Give me your read on that. Look, I would tell you, I am after watching so many Palestinians get slaughtered and murdered under this idea of a quote unquote Jewish state. And even though I make a distinction between Zionists and Jews, many people don't. And the government of Israel effectively has been going on a murder spree where we've been watching um, almost daily, just massacres. I'm more so shocked that this hasn't happened sooner. And by the way, not co-signing it. I don't want any innocent person to get killed. But if you are murdering like 100,000 people in the name of quote unquote a Jewish state, obviously there are going to be people who respond to that in ways that are going to be explosive and kinetic. Give me your thoughts on it, though.
Yeah, well, that's what Max Blumenthal is saying. He's Jewish, and he's very clear about that, that Israel creates more anti-Semitic sentiment than anyone,
Yeah.
And on purpose. That's the other thing Blumenthal says, and I agree, that, and you see Netanyahu couldn't have been happier that this had happened because, he's going to exploit it. And guess who's going to pay the price for it? The Palestinians,
Yes. Yes.
So obviously I condemn that act of terrorism, and that's what it appears to be. And the one, I guess, positive thing was that apparently a Muslim man, risked his life to disarm one of the individuals. So that's, I'm glad that happened, and
got shot twice.
Yeah, I think that will, I hope, mitigate the anti-Muslim frenzy that could result from all this. We live in a very dangerous and violent world, and what can you say? I mean, we're seeing, as you say, in Gaza, we're seeing that sort of thing every day. And in the West Bank, honestly. And in South Lebanon. So, and to much, less outrage, amongst the West. No one seems to care about those killings. And that's how it's always been, but so those are my thoughts on that. I mean, we'll see who these people really were that carried out these killings. If we'll ever find out, who knows? But
well, they're saying on social media, this has been going around, I guess, in alt social media, that this was staged, that this was some kind of false flag. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know why it would need to be a false flag. Like that's like when I'm looking at the world and I come to a conclusion about what I think is taking place. To me, is it a rational act, or at the very least, is it not rational act? Is it an expected act that after murdering hundreds of thousands of people of a particular demographic for 3 years, with the world seemingly not caring, that somebody will respond in an overt kinetic fashion? Well, the answer is yes. Meaning, I don't need it to be a false flag.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. Although, if it's true that that these folks who did this carried it out because they're upset about what's happening in Gaza, I mean, this is a terrible way to express that. I mean, because for the reasons we just said, because it predictably will come back on the Palestinians. This is not going to help the cause of those advocating for the Palestinians. So, all I can say is those people, if that's why they did what they did, they're not only mean, they're stupid.
I don't think they did it to help. I think they did it out of rage. There's a difference.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I it's just so misplaced rage that it borders on, it's so irrational as to border on, I don't know, the insane. And that's why I think some people think it's a false flag, because it's otherwise inexplicable. Again, it's predictably, the outcome is bad. But in any case, but I don't, at this point, there's no evidence it's a false flag, so I'm not going to
Right.
jump to that conclusion. But again, it will help Israel. That's what I mean. It doesn't matter if it's a false flag or not. It will help Israel. The result is the same.
Is it really inexplicable? I mean, I think this is the most explicable thing in the world. I mean, I don't know if explicable is a word, but if I give you an example.
Yeah, but to kill soft targets, I don't know. I never understood it. I never understood why you.
By the way,
that.
I'm not agreeing that this is okay.
Oh, I know,
So,
but you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you and I are outraged. I'm outraged. I'm not going to do something like that. I mean, you know, it's just, it's so crazy. Yeah.
A cop kills an African American in the States. A cop kills an African American in the States. You get massive amounts of protests that takes place, and you get police who are terrified and looking around corners because they think that they are now on the chopping block because of something that effectively took place that one of them did. Meaning it's a cause and effect. The fact that you have in the name of the Jewish state, has killed hundreds of thousands of people, starved millions, and has done this with impunity and continues to do it with impunity. And you have Jews celebrating a holiday. It's true that those are soft targets, but the fact that they've called themselves a Jewish state assigns a certain level of, let's say, responsibility, quote unquote, on Jews that, whether fair or not, is going to be looked at in those terms. I guess I'm saying it is, for me, infinitely foreseeable that something like this was going to take place.
Well, I mean, perhaps. I mean, certainly that's what Netanyahu's been saying.
Well, he's the cause.
Yeah, in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this wouldn't happen if Netanyahu wasn't out there effectively committing murder and the majority of the Israel agreeing with the murders that he's effectively committing. I don't know. I've become callous over this stuff. I've watched this stuff take place with nobody giving a shit for the last 3 years. And this selective value that is being applied to one, but not the other, is disgusting, frankly.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah. Let's go to Syria. So CENTCOM puts out that apparently 2 soldiers and 1 bystander was effectively murdered by ISIS. I agree with you, from my understanding, that this was somebody who was effectively part of the government, part of HTS. And Donald Trump, who bought Al-Jilani, Al-Shara, choose your flavor of ice cream that you want to name him, comes to the US. Donald Trump shakes his hand. Donald Trump gives him a vote of confidence. The guy used to be leader of ISIS. And now you have this bizarre situation where they're saying ISIS killed somebody, with the president of the United States having given his full-throated support to the former head of ISIS. This is bizarre.
Yeah, well, it is bizarre that he did that. I mean, except that we know that the U.S. has been partnering with groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda for years to do what they did in Syria. But as always, they're not reliable people, and they will bite the hand that feeds them, and that that's what we're seeing. I mean, the other thing is that the HTS has 26 different factions, and each faction has factions within it. So, I mean, and a third of the fighters for HTS are foreign fighters, right? They're not Syrian.
Yep.
And don't even speak Arabic. So,
wow, how
can one depend on that group to act in any kind of way? I mean, it's a classic case of Frankenstein's monster. I mean, the U.S. creates these monsters and then once in a while gets burned by them, and so that's what we're seeing. I mean, yeah, so not knowing all the history here, I mean, yeah, it's crazy that Trump would have welcomed him to DC. Honestly, though, honestly, it's crazier and more upsetting that Putin welcomed him to Moscow.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, after years of fighting this guy, right? I mean, the U.S. was working with Al-Jilani to overthrow Assad, okay? Putin was fighting him and lost many Russian lives and much Russian treasure fighting him, and then he brings him to Moscow and has a state meeting with him. That is more crazy to me and disappointing. And
Yeah.
that feeds into the conspiracy theories people have that Russia laid down for him and kind of let this happen, which, so, I mean, the whole world community has accepted this guy. I mean, practically, I don't know if Iran has, but I mean, you're talking only a couple countries maybe that haven't. He's been welcomed as part of the United Nations. I mean, it's just really crazy.
Yeah. I had Vanessa Beeley on the show, and her and I were talking, and she pointed out that because of his, let's say, relationship with the United States, because of his overt relationship with Israel, especially while Israel is attacking the country and stealing and balkanizing the country, that they are creating new members of ISIS. Basically, it's like it's expanding the pool of ISIS in a way that Al-Jilani doesn't necessarily control. Give me your take on that. I mean, as you
Yeah,
point
no,
out,
I mean,
factors.
these groups like ISIS, they will reproduce themselves. I mean, they now have their own state,
Yeah,
and they will increase their ranks. They will spread to other countries, and it's a ticking time bomb. It has been for a long time, and it's terrible. And again, the West intentionally brought this on, and they will rue the day. Everyone, in the West is complaining about immigrants, but all these wars the West has brought to the world, especially to the Middle East, has created all these immigrants, right?
yes,
And you're just gonna have more chaos and more migration. I mean, the world has been broken in many ways by these wars. There's now, I think, more refugees in the world than ever. I think something like easily 20 million, maybe 30. And again, Brown University keeps track of this stuff. And they estimate that since 9/11, the U.S. has killed nearly 5 million Muslims.
that's astonishing.
I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah,
I urge people to go to the Brown University site and look at that. They keep a running tally of these things, and the trillions of dollars spent on these things. I mean, it's just like the West picked up the world like a snow globe and just smashed it. And yeah, the results are catastrophic.
what do you think is going to be the ultimate outcome of Syria? Because he doesn't seem like he has power in this sense. There are too many groups. There's too much land being balkanized.
I think it's going to be anarchy. I think it's going to be chaos. I agree. I think there is. I don't know how much governing Al-Jilani's doing. I think it's going to be awful. It's going to be awful for the Syrian people. It already is. I mean, the pluralistic society that existed for centuries has been crushed.
Yeah.
Because Al-Jilani's forces, which is basically Al-Qaeda, is doing what the West had predicted, and they're setting up a religious caliphate. I was in Syria in 2021, and you could go into the Christian quarter of Damascus, and you could have a drink of alcohol. I mean, at any time of day. There's a nice little square there that you could do that. All those bars have been shut down. You cannot get alcohol anymore because the government has shut that down.
Why do they believe that they're going to be able to control whoever comes after Jelani? And that's assuming Jelani maintains power.
I don't think the West thinks that far ahead. They'll deal with that when it comes. They were dead set on destroying, Assad's government, and they did that, and they're happy with it. What
That's
comes
entirely the
next?
case.
What comes next? Who knows? In Israel, as Jelani was taking over, as you know, Israel bombed Syria many times and destroyed all of its defenses.
Right.
So there is no state, basically. And that's how they wanted it. That's what the West wanted. And again, the Syrian people will suffer greatly from all this, and the West doesn't care. So it has been eliminated as part of the resistance. And that's what the U.S. and its allies wanted. So, and of course, with the goal being that they want to do the same thing to Iran.
Can you explain something to me? And I guess this could be the last question. I mean, for one, Netanyahu is trying to politicize the Bondi Beach thing to act as if Hezbollah or Iran has something to do with it, which is
absurd. Absolutely absurd. This is not what they do. Yeah.
Can you explain why Hamas was cheering the fall of Syria? That still confuses me.
Yeah, it's not confusing. It's disappointing, but it's not surprising. It's because Hamas ideologically grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood has ideological ties to Al-Qaeda. So that's where their sympathies lied, and Hamas was involved actively in the war in Syria to topple Assad. They actively had fighters there fighting Assad. And what happened is, before Assad was overthrown, at some point there was a rapprochement between Assad and Hamas. And Hamas kind of apologized for what it did, because they did realize that this was not good for them, ultimately. But
how did they not know that? I mean, like, where did they think weapons were coming from? Where did they think the resistance and pipeline and all this stuff was?
They thought they thought that they could maybe take over Syria, right? They did think that. They had delusions of grandeur, right? And that never happened, obviously. And again, they regretted it greatly, but they did it, and they never liked Assad, even though he helped them. But they still didn't like him. Again, they were happy to bite the hand that fed them too, is the truth.
Wow.
So, and that now we get what we get. I mean, that it's a terrible thing, man. There was a lot of treachery to go around. I mean, the Syrian people were betrayed by a lot of people, and Hamas was one of them. That's just a fact. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat that.
Yeah. Dan, you have my appreciation for joining me, man. You really do.
I'm always happy to. I like you. I like your show, and I wish you all the best.
Well, I appreciate that. I like you too. Thank you for that.
I like just having a conversation. It's great. So,
Dan Kovalik, he's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, a political activist. He previously taught international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and he is representing, I'm going to invert this name.
Gustavo Petro. Yes.
Yeah, Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia. So badass. That's so badass.
Thank you.
You have a good one, man. Thank you for this.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Shout out to Dan. We've come to the end. Maybe I misunderstood something with Ja in his conversation today. Usually he is rock solid. Yesterday actually means Monday time zone difference. I'm now in Baku, Azerbaijan. He sends a thumbs up and then nothing else. Hopefully he'll get back with me. Maybe something else is going on. I'm not quite sure. We have chats. Let's go to the chat before we call it a day. I think this is Zoila Rosa. Feel the same as you, Jamal. Why they care for this and not Palestine? It's so one-sided. Where are you now? I'm in Baku. I'm in Azerbaijan. I'm going to be here for at least 1 month. And after that, I plan on heading to Lebanon. So that's the plan anyway. So far, so good. I enjoy it here. Yeah, I enjoyed it here so far. I mean, granted, I've only been here for 1 day, so go figure. I had a doctor's appointment today, so I'm dragging a bit of ass today. Where to watch genocide in Gaza? You said where to watch it? Dude, I mean, it was every day on Twitter, every day on TikTok. I mean, keep in mind, part of the reason that they purchased or forced the sale of TikTok was exactly because of the content that they were effectively showing. Part of the reason that they were going after media and everything else in the United States is because we were watching a genocide day after day after day. I could show you bodies of kids mangled. I could show you kids missing head or parts of their head, missing arms, missing limbs. Watched it daily. And it's like, when you do that every day, what does it do to a person? It makes you callous, especially when the perpetrators of it now want you to cry for them. And I don't have it in me. Just call me a hard ass, but I don't have it in me. All right. I'm going to call it a day. Shout out to Dan Kovalik. Shout out to Mark Sleboda. We had a good crowd here today, despite only having 2 guests. Tomorrow, I think Ajamu Baraka is joining tomorrow. I could be wrong. John Helmer is going to be on Thursday. Yeah, I'll make sure. I'll see. Come on. Okay, he hasn't responded yet. I'll follow up with him. He said any day but Monday, so Tuesday is not Monday. So hopefully that works. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Helmer, Esteban Carrillo, he's going to be on tomorrow. I want to see if I can get Garland on Wednesday. I haven't had him on a while. Tim Anderson, he's going to be on Wednesday also. He's a great guest. He's been ill for a bit. He broke his ribs or something, but he's on the mend, so he'll be back on. So part of the show is set up for this week. Next week, I'm going to take the week off for Christmas. It's my first vacation since starting the show back in this format. And I'm looking forward to taking those days off. Not to mention, I don't expect people to be able to come on the show anyway for that week. So we'll see. We'll play by ear. I may do Monday, Tuesday, and then on the 24th, take those days. But I'll keep you apprised of what's taking place. All right. I'm one of the few people that thought very highly of Assad and his wife. See, that's the rub, right? I didn't think one way or the other about Assad and his wife. I usually don't think one way or the other about world leaders. To me, it boils down to, is this right or is this wrong? It's just basic principles. Do we have the right to go into a country and overthrow that country just because we don't particularly like who's running that country? Hell no. So this idea of us going into Venezuela, for example, well, Maduro's a bad guy, so we get rid of Maduro. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind if you think that's okay. That we are trying to make the argument that it is okay to overthrow Assad. And my argument and many people's argument was, dude, you're using head choppers to try to overthrow a government. What do you think is going to happen when those head choppers take over? And it's like, it's going to be democracy. It's like, you're out of your mind. They're going to be murders. And that's exactly what took place. Ethnic cleansing. You had a government that was effectively multi-religious, sexy women on beaches, drinking alcohol. And almost overnight, a bunch of maniacs and goons with thick necks are roaming about chopping off heads. How is that a better outcome? And it was the same thing in Iraq, right? Sure, Saddam is a bad guy. By the same token, do we think what took place in Iraq with 1 million people being killed is somehow a better outcome? Like, it is infinitely foreseeable what these regime change wars end up being. And you can take that assessment without having any assessment of the person who's at the top of the helm. It's one thing if you're making an argument to me that this person is committing a genocide. Okay, maybe we're having a different conversation. None of those was the case. We just got rid of people because we wanted something out of that territory, some geopolitical expansion, something to do with the territory to which we were effectively taking. And as I always tell my mom, in considering global politics, life rarely matters. It's not the thing that affects how people behave in these situations. They will come up with some kind of narrative in order to justify a huge amount of killing, and they would go about the killing. Think of what Trump is doing right now. Oh, there are drugs coming out of Venezuela. Nobody believes that, by the way. And yet it still doesn't stop them from committing mass murder. And there seems to be no consequence for that mass murder. Just shameless, raw murder. That's all it is. So, all right. I am going to call it a day. I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. You could support this content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee, memberships. All of these things help support the content. I get the sense that this show is going to be demonetized. I don't know that, but we'll see. When I say your support makes this content what it is, I really do mean it. Definitely like the video. You can make comments, all of those things. I get my point of view. I've become a hard ass. That's all. I've become a hard ass. I'm going to say like, share, and subscribe. Be safe and be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one all.